Chapter 166. Under Charlie's protection, Samuel Daly treated Karen rather well, so she was still able to do whatever she wanted. After their high school final examinations, Karen got into the best university in Beaufort City, as she was the best scorer. It was what Samuel Daly wished for her to study. But the major that she wanted to pursue was fashion designing. Samuel Daly was mad at her because of this matter. With the anger, he disallowed her to have dinner as a punishment. Not only that, he even disallowed her to sit with the family. When Charlie knew about this, he climbed over the wall from the next door, climbed along a big tree until he reached the upper floor of her house, and gave her some hot food. "Karen, eat this." "Charlie, you always treat me the best." She took the lunchbox and looked at him with the biggest smile. "If I don't treat you well, then who will?" Charlie said proudly and rubbed her head. Looking at her eating like a pig, Charlie couldn't help but laugh. "Take your time, no one will take it away from you." Karen swallowed a piece of chicken and said sadly, "I didn't eat anything, and was punished to stand here for 2 hours. I'm starving." "Well, you can't eat too fast." Charlie thought for a moment and added, "Karen, don't go head-to-head with Uncle Daly on this matter. Let's think about a way to convince him." "Did you think of any idea?" Karen asked while taking huge bites off of the chicken drumstick. Charlie said, "Don't worry about this. I'll talk to your dad. He will surely agree." "Karen, Dad's coming." Christine peeked from the room and whispered to them. Karen quickly swallowed the food in her mouth and wiped it using her hand. "Charlie, take it away. I don't want to get punished again. Remember what I told you. Don't confront Uncle Daly." Charlie held the bag and turned back quickly. Karen nodded repeatedly. As soon as Charlie climbed over the wall and left, Samuel Daly opened the door of the balcony and came over. He asked, "Have you thought it through?" Karen lowered her head and did not speak. Christine peeked from the room again and said, "Dad, Karen admitted her fault to me just now. You know that she is stubborn. Don't be mad at her." Samuel Daly looked at the pieces of chicken bones and immediately understood who came by. He softened his tone and said, "Good for you. You may go back to your room." Karen returned to the room and gave Christine a big hug. "Christine, luckily I still have you guys." Christine rubbed her head and said softly, "Karen, you know Dad's temper. You should be more respectful in front of him. It's you who will suffer if you fight with him." "Thank you, Christine." Karen Daly sighed out of relief in Christine's arms. She felt blessed for having such a good sister. Once, Karen thought that she would be with Charlie for the rest of her life. He would be the hero who could stand behind her and guard her for a lifetime. That lasted until he and Christine slept together. The two people she trusted the most betrayed her and pushed her into the abyss. When she heard the news, her mind went blank. She couldn't find any adjectives to describe her feelings at that time, until today. The relationship between the three of them broke instantly, and there was no possibility of fixing it. After 3 years, Charlie still thought that she would come back to him, and he said that he still loved her. Love? Karen admitted that she used to love Charlie. In fact, she loved him to death. Therefore, she was hurt deeply when he had slept with her sister that she trusted the most. Since then, she no longer believed in love, so when Kevin proposed marriage to her, she agreed without thinking much. Without love, even if she was betrayed again, she would no longer feel sad and heartbroken. Even if they separated someday, she should not feel heartbroken. "Karen?" Hearing Faye Reed's worried voice, Karen came to her senses and looked at her with a smile. "Don't worry, I'm fine." However, she felt that life is so fragile. It would be gone all of a sudden. Her mother's life did, so was Charlie's. The two people she cared about the most in the past instantly disappeared from her life, leaving no trace at all. "Karen?" Faye Reed was worried again. "Faye, just go and do your work. I will try my best to complete Mr. Baker's order by noon." Karen took a deep breath, flipped open the document, and started working. The reason Christine Daly killed Charlie was because of the dispute between them that lasted for years. It was not something in Karen's control. At this moment, her cell phone suddenly rang. The ring trembled her hand, which was holding her brush. Looking at the familiar phone number on her screen, she picked up the call. Mr. Wiles' pleasant voice came from the phone. "Miss Daly, our plan has been completed in advance. Do you want to come to Beaufort City to have a look at the final results?" Even on the call, Karen could picture the man on the other end of the phone smiling with his eyebrows raised. "Congratulations," she said. "You too," he said. Karen took another deep breath and said, "Mr. Wiles, now that your purpose had been achieved, let's not see each other again." Mr. Wiles said again, "Christine went crazy. Now she is staying in a mental institution. Miss Daly, are you really not coming back to have a look?" Karen did not say anything else and hung up. She did not want anything to do with this person anymore. After ending the call with Mr. Wiles, Karen couldn't calm down. All she could think about were the people and everything in the past. With her state of mind, Karen could not work at all. In addition to her sickness, she informed Faye Reed and went home after. After having lunch at home, Karen went outside to bask in the sun. Finally, she felt too sleepy and went back to her room to sleep. However, Karen did not sleep well. Those people who occupied her entire childhood would come into her dream from time to time. "Karen?" She heard her mother calling her and was looking at her with a faint smile. "Karen?" She heard Charlie calling her. He also looked at her with a smile. His face gradually became disgusting and horrible. I love you so much, but you're not coming back to me. Karen. She heard that Christine was calling her name. Christine was still smiling gently. All of a sudden, her face became unrecognizable. How could you live such a happy life, but I'm stuck in prison. I'm here today all because of you. No, no. Karen waved her hand and tried to chase away the shadow in front of her. It's not me. I didn't. Chapter 167. Not you? The one speaking suddenly transformed into Charlie. He stepped forward and strangled her on the neck. Karen, we used to be your closest family, but you betrayed us with someone else. I didn't. Karen wanted to speak, but she was choked by him. Her face turned red and she couldn't breathe. She struggled to even say a word. Karen, do you know how you were born? Samuel Daly gave your mother to another man like she was a toy, and that's how your mother got pregnant. Look at Kevin Kyle. Who is he? He is Leo Kyle, who controls Rovio Corporation Inc. He's the dream of a lot of people. But look at you. Who are you? How did you deserve to be his wife? You think you can tie him up just by being pregnant with his child? Do you think his promise could last forever? There's only one reason he's still with you now, is because he hasn't met the woman that he truly loves yet. The people who were pointing at her increased. She tried to refute them, but didn't even have a chance to speak. She could do nothing but glare at the people who accused her and struggled helplessly. Karen. Out of the blue, she heard a unique low voice. She turned around and saw Kevin Kyle standing behind her. Kevin. She tried to call his name, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not make a sound. Karen, I don't care about your background, but my family does, he said. His voice was low and sexy as usual. His facial expression was clear and cold and didn't show any emotions. Before she could speak, he continued, Karen, it's a marriage without love anyway. Let's break up. We'll each find our own life partner. Kevin. It took a long time before Karen made a sound. She rushed over and grabbed him but missed instead. He suddenly disappeared from her sight. Even you are giving me up? She looked at the direction in which he disappeared, screaming in grief and pain. They agreed that it's a sham marriage in the first place, but why did she feel sad when he wanted to break up with her? Her heart went from painful to numb, as if it was no longer hers. Did she have feelings for him? Other than the marriage, could she get more from him that she shouldn't have asked for? Karen, wake up. Wake up. It was Kevin's voice again, but it was different from what she had just heard. He sounded urgent this time. Karen opened her eyes swiftly and saw a pair of eyes that looked anxious and a frown on his face. He didn't leave. He was still here. When she realized that he did not leave her, her flustered heart suddenly calmed down. Kevin took a piece of tissue to help her wipe her forehead, which was wet from all the sweat. Don't be afraid. It's just a dream. Looking at his caring eyes and listening to his pleasant voice, Karen felt like crying. She blinked her eyes hard to stop the tears from dripping. Kevin rubbed her head and asked, Karen, what did you dream of? Karen sniffed and said, I dreamt that you would break up with me and we went separate ways. He held her in his arms and locked her with one hand. He gently touched her belly with the other hand. He said softly, it's the contrary. We will be together forever. But, Karen said, but the dream was so real that she felt scared and timid. She felt like she would lose him. Karen, tell me, is something wrong? Kevin asked. She went to buy a car a few days ago and asked him strange questions. She would also wake up from her nightmare these days. At first, Kevin thought that pregnant women would be anxious at the beginning of the pregnancy, but after observing for a few days, he was sure that something must have happened. Why do you ask so? Could anything have happened? She blinked at him and her eyes were so innocent that no one could tell if she was hiding something from him. Kevin didn't ask any more questions as she didn't want to talk about it. He just stared at her quietly. A lot happened in my dream, the people and things in the past. It was terrible looking back. Kevin Kyle was smart. Karen Daly was worried that he could figure it out, so she explained further. Take a good rest at home and take a day off work tomorrow. Perhaps he was thinking too much. They were all too nervous expecting their first child. All right. She leaned in his arms and said softly, Mr. Kyle, I'm hungry. Do you have anything for me to eat? Just a second. Kevin Kyle got out of bed and helped her sit down before he turned around and left. Looking at his back as he left, Karen was in a daze. Although she was unwilling to admit, but what Grandpa Kyle said had quite an impact on her. Otherwise, she would not have had such a dream that Kevin would leave her. Although she woke up from the dream, but the fear was still there. Fortunately, he was still here, and he could make her feel safe. Not long after, Kevin came in with food in his hand. Here's some porridge and broth. The doctor said that these dishes are good for pregnant women and babies, he said. Kevin didn't have any experience prior to this, so he read a lot about it these days. Now he could be considered as a half-expert in the pregnancy field. Kevin took a spoonful of porridge and gestured it to her mouth. Open your mouth. Karen smiled sweetly and said, Mr. Kyle, are you going to feed me? He could have asked Aunt Jen or Aunt Anne to prepare the meals for her, but he did it by himself. Now he even wanted to feed her. Karen felt that if she let Kevin go on like this, she would become a couch potato soon. Come on. Kevin nodded and said, Open your mouth. Karen opened her mouth and took a spoon. Then she looked up at him and smiled. Mr. Kyle, thank you so much for taking care of me and my child. I am your husband, the father of the child, Kevin said with a straight face. If he didn't take good care of them, did he want other men to do it instead? Then should I grant you the title of the best husband in the history? Karen said with a smile. He was so attentive to her. After knowing that she was pregnant, he didn't come back late for even one night. He got off work on time every day, and didn't go on any business trip. In the past, he would have a business trip now and then. She didn't believe that he suddenly had nothing on hand. He was Leo Kyle from Rovio Corporation and held the highest position in the Rovio business empire, but he was willing to do these trivial things for her. How could she not be touched? Chapter 168. Karen did not know why. The better Kevin Kyle treated her, the more unsafe she felt. She was afraid that he would no longer be by her side when she woke up one day, and she would never be able to find him again. If he didn't treat her so well, even if he was not here anymore, she would easily adapt to it. But now, she found that she was getting more and more reluctant to leave him. Even though their breakup was just a dream, she felt so heartbroken. Although the breakup happened in her dream, she still felt scared at this moment. Karen, can you tell me what you're thinking? Kevin frowned slightly. His eyes looked dark and deep. Karen was always absent-minded recently. Kevin Kyle knew that she was keeping something from him, but he couldn't guess what it was. She was still eating, and he was still by her side, but Kevin Kyle couldn't see himself in her eyes. He didn't know where was her mind again. She was always like this recently, which worried him very much, but he could not untie the knot in her heart. He even thought about hiring someone to investigate and follow her. He wanted to see what she was doing and who had she met all day long, but he didn't want to do something that upsets her. I'm wondering if it's a baby boy or girl. Karen blinked and looked at Kevin. Mr. Kyle, do you like boys or girls? Seeing that the Kyle family loved Mia so much, she thought that they shouldn't care too much on the gender of the baby. Both, he said. As long as it was their child, he would be very happy, no matter it was a boy or a girl. I really hope to give birth to several children at a time, so that they won't feel lonely. Karen tilted her head and said foolishly, silly. Hearing her childish and cute words, Kevin could not resist laughing. He looked really handsome when he smiled. His eyebrows were like swords flying in the air, his sexy thin lips were slightly hooked, and his facial expression was much softer, as if it could melt the glacier in snow. However, he always looked aloof and cool. He seldom smiled, and she rarely had the opportunity to see him smile so happily. She felt like kissing him. With this thought, Karen quietly inhaled a mouthful of cold air, clenched her hands into fists, leaned forward to gently kiss his sexy thin lips, and stretched out her tongue to lick them. Karen, don't mess around. Kevin stepped back and pushed her away. If they did something now, the consequences would be serious. Did I do something wrong? Karen muttered. She just wanted to kiss him, but she didn't think of anything more. What did he mean by asking her not to mess around? Did he think that she wanted to sleep with him? You'll stay at home and rest tomorrow, and you're not allowed to go anywhere. Listen to me, Kevin added. She pouted her lips and pretended to be dissatisfied. What a bossy man. The next day, Karen stayed at home and did not go to work. Whenever she had nothing to do at home, she would always think about those things in the past. She thought about it thoroughly and decided to visit Christine in Beaufort City. She booked a flight online and took a taxi to the airport. She flew to Beaufort City without telling Kevin Kyle. She knew that if she were to tell Kevin, he would definitely go with her. She had already caused him a lot of trouble these days, so she didn't want to bother him anymore. After more than 2 hours of flight, she finally arrived at the airport of Beaufort City. She felt a breeze of cold air as soon as she got off the plane. Karen knew that the weather in Beaufort City during March was so cold that it would make people tremble, so she brought along a thick coat. She could not let herself freeze. When she walked out of the airport, she called Mr. Willis and asked for Christine's address. Then she went straight to the mental institution. Miss Daly, I thought that you wouldn't come. Why are you here? It seems that I have a good sense of people. We are all sentimental by nature. She heard Mr. Willis's pleasant voice as soon as she got out of the car. She turned around and saw Mr. Willis standing on the steps with his hand in the pocket of his pants and looking at her with a faint smile. Where is she? Karen did not want to talk to him about anything else. Come with me. After that, Mr. Willis went inside. Karen caught up with him and was walking a few steps behind him. Looking at his tall and straight back, she had to admit that this man was also well-groomed. He was always smiling. It seemed harmless, but in fact, he was something else. Otherwise, he couldn't have the power to cause the Gook family to suffer such a big loss and never have a chance to turn over again in the future. At the right side of the lobby, they went through a long corridor and reached the residential area of the mental hospital. After they walked through a path, a private courtyard appeared in front of them. Mr. Willis turned around and smiled gently. Christine is in this yard. Do you want to go in or talk to her outside? I'll just talk to her outside. Karen did not forget that she was still pregnant. For the safety of the child, she would try her best to keep a distance from Christine. Mr. Wireless asked someone to open the window. Karen took a look inside through the window. She saw Christine sitting quietly in the room. Christine was facing them with her back. She couldn't see her expression. She didn't know whether she was really out of her mind or just pretending. Miss Daly, your sister Karen, is here to see you. Mr. Wireless clapped his hands and said. After a long time, Christine turned around slowly. A ray of light flashed upon her dull eyes when saw Karen. She looked so fierce that it was scary to look at. All of a sudden, she saw Christine's face, which looked like it was covered with caterpillars. Karen's stomach churned, and she ran to the side and vomited. She had been vomiting for a long time before she felt a little better. Mr. Wireless handed her a bottle of mineral water and said, I thought that you should be able to handle this. I didn't expect that you would vomit so bad just by seeing her face. Karen grabbed the water over, took a sip of it, and said, Did Charlie do it? Something extremely bad happened, that it could make Christine Daly kill Charlie. Karen thought about all kinds of possibilities before coming here, but she didn't expect that Charlie would make Christine look like this. It was clear to Karen Daly that Charlie was used to being arrogant and overbearing. With that kind of personality, he would be the most tender and doting person in the world for you when you're standing by him. But once you turned against him and stood on his opposite side, his arrogance would be the most deadly poison and the sharpest weapon to hurt you. In the past, when she could get along with Charlie, he treated her so well that it was simply not comparable to that of ordinary people. 3 years later, she stood at the opposite side of him, and he would threaten her with the safety of her closest family. The fact that her mother would be forced to commit suicide must have something to do with Charlie. Except for the young master of the Gook family, who else could be so cruel? Mr. Wireless smiled with his voice raised slightly, like he was sharing good news. Chapter 169, I want to talk to Christine Daly in private, Karen Daly said. I'll go to the front and wait for you then. If you need anything, let me know. Mr. Wireless smiled as he finished speaking. He then turned around and left. Karen Daly took a deep breath and returned to the window again. Christine Daly quietly looked over to the window from the inside of the room, and her eyes were deadly. Karen Daly looked at Christine's face. Looking at her disfigured face, she thought of a lot of things in the past. Once upon a time, Christine was outstanding and bright like a diamond. At that time, many boys wanted to pursue her, but they were rejected by her. Until then, Karen Daly finally knew that Christine Daly had always liked Charlie. Her life goal was to marry Charlie. Are you here to make fun of me? Christine suddenly laughed. Her laughter sounded particularly horrible in this quiet yard. Karen's mind was wandering somewhere, but when Christine's cold and hateful voice came to her ears, she came back to her senses. She saw that Christine's eyes were still calm, but the expression on her face was so ferocious that it made people sick. Karen was holding back nausea in her stomach and said calmly, Yes. If Christine Daly wanted to think ill of her intentions, just let her be. She never cared what Christine thought of her anyway. To be honest, Karen Daly did not know why she came to see Christine. Perhaps she wanted to see what happened to the person who had hurt her so deeply. Perhaps she wanted to see if she really went crazy or was just faking it. Or maybe it was because both Christine and she shared the same blood from their mother. Christine Daly was the only person in the world who was biologically related to her. She could not understand this complicated emotion. She could not understand even if she kept thinking and did not want to ruminate on it. It's a pity that you're going to be disappointed. Christine Daly glared at Karen Daly angrily, then laughed and said, I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. I'm very sane. Karen Daly said, Look at yourself. You're locked up here. Does it make any difference whether you're crazy or not? It's Mr. Wireless. All of this was because of him. He was the one who asked me to kill Charlie. It's him. Everything is because of him. Christine burst out laughing so hard that there were tears streaming down her cheeks. Not only Charlie betrayed me, now there's Mr. Wireless. Why are all the men in the world so scary? Karen, don't be too happy yet. As long as I'm alive, I'll find a way to make you suffer. Christine Daly added. Christine, it's all your fault that caused you the consequences today. Do you still think it's someone else's fault? Karen Daly said. If it wasn't for your existence, how could my mother not love me? How could Charlie not love me? If it wasn't for you, how could those people who grew up with us see me as invisible? Christine Daly suddenly rushed over to the window crazily and shouted. Karen took 2 steps back, shook her head and sighed. It's not that those people don't care about you, but you've only set your eyes on the person you care about and couldn't see anyone else. Karen Daly, don't act like you know everything. If you really could accept it, why would you leave Beaufort City? Why would you leave your mother so many years? If you're really so considerate, how come you never forgave Charlie? Listening to Christine's words, Karen Daly laughed. If I don't leave Beaufort City, was I just going to stay and being harmed by all of you? Why should I forgive Charlie? He's not worth my forgiveness. Christine's eyes fell on the lean figure coming from behind Karen. She suddenly laughed and said, Karen Daly, you should remember that Charlie used to treat you so well, but he threw you under the bus anyhow. You'll see, your husband will become the second Charlie soon. Karen had never regarded Kevin, Kyle, and Charlie as the same kind of people. She was furious when she heard Christine's words. Up until the circumstances today, Christine Daly was still thinking of cursing her. This woman deserved her outcome. Karen. Just as Karen was about to refute, she heard Kevin Kyle calling her name. Her body stiffened slightly. She took a deep breath quietly before turning around to look at him. He stood a few steps behind her. He was wearing a silver-gray suit as usual and stood straight. He squinted his eyes, and he seemed to be angry. She didn't know how long he had been here. She didn't know how much did he hear. Kevin. Why are you here? In addition to worry, Karen Daly was more surprised. It didn't take long for Kevin to come after her. That was to say, he followed closely behind her on the flight. Christine Daly laughed and said, Karen, you had just left him for a while and your man is here now. He really loves you. I really want to see how miserable you will be when he abandons you in the future. Kevin Kyle came over and held Karen Daly's hand tightly with his hand. He looked at Christine with gloomy eyes and said coldly, I'm afraid that you will be disappointed. I will take good care of my wife, and it will never change for the rest of my life. Kevin's voice was very soft. It didn't sound angry, but it was powerful. The strong aura from him instantly suppressed Christine's arrogance. She opened her mouth, but could not say a word. Kevin Kyle turned to look at Karen Daly. The fierceness in his eyes disappeared in an instant. He then grabbed her hand and left. Looking at them from behind, especially when she saw the way Kevin Kyle carefully protecting Karen, Christine Daly couldn't get her eyes off them. She thought in her heart that she used to be so close to that man. If she had not let go of it easily in the past, if she had tried harder, everything that Karen had now might have belonged to her. Along the way, Kevin Kyle kept silent and did not look at Karen Daly. It was not until he got into the car that his deep and angry eyes fell on her. Karen Daly felt extremely uncomfortable under his gaze. She opened her mouth and said, Kevin, Karen Daly, do you see me as your husband? Kevin Kyle said coldly. If she had treated him as her husband, why did she take care of everything on her own and never tell him anything? She hid everything in her heart and locked herself in her own world. The door of her heart was not willing to welcome him. He really wanted to enter her world and shelter her from the outside, but she didn't want to give him a chance. I don't see you as my husband? Then what do you think I see you as? An ATM? Money? Karen bit her lip and stared at him furiously. Chapter 170. A what? Kevin Kyle thought. As soon as Karen Daly finished her words, she felt pain on her lips. Before she could react, she was kissed by Kevin Kyle. He broke into her mouth easily and forced her to accept his powerful kiss. Oh. Karen Daly raised her fist and hit him in the chest repeatedly. Bastard, let me go! She scolded, but Kevin Kyle did not pay attention to her at all. He kissed her like an angry lion. His kiss was too strong that Karen Daly didn't even have the strength to struggle, but she didn't give up easily. Karen Daly couldn't push him away, nor could she hurt him. This man's strength and the muscles on his body were surprisingly strong. Karen Daly was very angry, or perhaps she was out of her mind, so she slipped one hand into the collar of his suit and scratched his chest. Kevin Kyle's body shook slightly and he let go of her in a hurry. He pushed her away and stared at her face with his deep eyes. Bastard! She reached out and pinched him hard, and then raised her fist to punch him in the chest twice. You piece of wood, don't you know how much I care about you? Her sudden confession surprised Kevin Kyle, and he heard her say, I care about you. I even had dreams that you will leave me. They left me depressed when I woke up. Every time I think of the possibility that we can't last forever, I will be heartbroken. Kevin Kyle was shocked and said, Karen Daly, stop, let me finish. Karen Daly interrupted him fiercely like a small beast. You said that you want to take care of me for a lifetime, so do I. I want to give birth to a bunch of kids and watch them grow up together. When we grow old in the future, we can travel around like your parents. Karen, are you serious? After a long time, Kevin Kyle stammered. Kevin Kyle, the man who once gave a speech in front of mass crowds before, he was calm, cool, and confident. But now, because of Karen Daly's simple words, he was so nervous that he even stammered. You heard me, Karen Daly said angrily. Kevin Kyle was so shocked that he couldn't speak anymore. He only felt that his heart was racing. It was the first time in his life that his heart pounded so fast as if it was going to jump out of his throat. He was at a loss for words. He held her head again and kissed her hard again. Oh. Karen Daly pushed him away. Was this man out of his mind? He kissed her whether he was happy or angry. She was almost out of breath because of his kiss. After a long time, Kevin Kyle finally let go of her. He caressed her delicate and smooth face with his rough fingers and called her name in a low voice, Karen Daly. Then do you have anything to say? She had taken the initiative to confess to him. As a man, shouldn't he do something? Okay, I know. Kevin Kyle pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. He used so much force that it seemed as if he wanted to fuse with her. Does he know? What kind of answer was that? Karen Daly wanted to bite him again, so she opened her mouth and bit him on the chest. She cursed angrily in her heart. Bastard! How can you be so irritating? Kevin Kyle, my stomach seems to be in pain. Karen Daly was scolding him in her heart. Suddenly, she felt a faint pain in her stomach, and she was so scared that her body went limp. Uncle Watson, drive to the hospital. Kevin Kyle shouted at the outside of the car, stroking Karen Daly's baby bump. Don't be afraid, it's nothing. The driver, Mr. Watson, immediately got in the car and started the car to rush to the nearest hospital. As soon as their car left, Mr. Willis, who had been gone for a long time, slowly walked out. Looking at the car that was far away, he smiled and said, Leo Kyle, I have to thank you very much. If it weren't for you helping me this time, how could I have reached my goals so quickly? How could Charlie die in Christine Daly's hands so quickly? Others didn't know, but he was very clear that the things that had happened recently were all controlled by Leo Kyle from Rovio Corporation, Inc. The distinguished Gook family had fallen and disappeared in such a short period of time. No one except Leo Kyle had the capability to do so. There was a trap set up by Leo Kyle, a dead end that people couldn't get out of. Since the Gook family was in trouble at the beginning, Charlie sent Christine Daly away. Christine Daly's betrayal to the Gook family, Bernard being caught, Charlie being killed, each step was carried out in accordance with the plans arranged by Leo Kyle, without any deviation. If there was a mistake, it might be that he didn't expect that his wife would suddenly come to Beaufort City. In addition to worrying about his wife's safety, Leo Kyle was also more afraid that his wife would know that he was actually the mastermind behind all this. Mr. Willis's eyes moved closely with their car until he could no longer see them. Then he turned around and walked inside and came to Christine Daly's yard again. He pushed open the courtyard door and walked in. He came to Christine Daly's room and sat down. He smiled and said, How do you feel when you see that your rival is so happy now? Christine Daly raised her head and looked at him quietly. After staring at him for a long time, she slowly said, I'm crazy. What do I feel? Would you like to have a look at a video? He asked, but he did not get Christine Daly's consent. He clicked on a video on his mobile phone anyhow. Charlie's curse, the screaming of Christine Daly, and the sound of her beating Charlie to death came from the video. Christine Daly glanced at him and moved her eyes away. She was so scared that she shivered. Willis, you have already gotten everything you want. What on earth do you want to do? In fact, I just wanted to tell you that the real reason you killed Charlie and locked up here today, the real mastermind behind the scheme was not me, but the man who was here earlier. Mr. Willis smiled and said, At the end of the day, we are just pawns used by him. When these pawns are useless, they are often regarded as abandoned chess pieces. You should know what will happen to the abandoned chess pieces better than I do. Karen Daly was the best example. After listening to Mr. Willis's words, Christine Daly did not respond for a long time. When he was about to lose patience, she said, Does he really care about that woman so much? Mr. Willis said, If he doesn't care about her, what was it? Think about it carefully. Those who had hurt Karen Daly before, all of them were in trouble. They were either bankrupt or doomed. Christine Daly grabbed Mr. Willis and asked, How can we save ourselves? Looking at Christine Daly's flustered look, Mr. Willis smiled faintly. If you want to help yourself, you have to behave first. Don't catch his attention again.